Let's look at a little bit of mental math here. A lot of times Singapore will create problems that are horizontal like this so that we can encourage mental math. Mental math is just being able to do math in your head. And there are a few strategies that Singapore likes to introduce. For instance, if we were looking at this problem right here, what we could do is say 8 is almost 10, and really easily I could go ahead and I could subtract 10 from 45. So if I pretend that 8 is 10, so I'm just going to rewrite my problem underneath. Is going to be 35. And then if I go back, that's terrible writing, sorry. If I go back and I look at what I subtracted compared to what I should have subtracted, I subtracted 2 more than I should have. Now, that's kind of like saying to a child, their sibling took 2 more Skittles than they should have from their plate or candy jar. They need to be given back. So in this instance, we took 10 Skittles from the plate when we really should have taken 8. And if that's the case, then we need to give those Skittles back. To give those Skittles back, we need to add back the difference between these two numbers, which is 2. So I'm adding back those 2 because technically I was supposed to be subtracting 8 instead of 10. Now that sounds really confusing, but as they practice it over and over again, it does become a lot easier. And we're going to see that here in a second. So here we go. That 35 was what we were left with, and then we added back those 2 Skittles that we took that were too many, and we were left with 37. All right, let's look at another one there. So if we're looking at something like 345 minus 8, that's something that we can do really quickly by subtracting 10 instead. Sometimes you'll see Singapore write it like this, just so that we can remember that we're taking 2 more than we should. This portion we can go ahead and solve by saying that it is 335, and adding back those 2 is 337. All right, so let's see another one of those that looks a little bit different. For instance, I'm going to make a big jump here. Going ahead and subtracting from 4,562, we're going to subtract 842. The way that we do this is we can break up our numbers into a handful of different pieces. Think like that number bond portion where you can actually take numbers and break them apart into pieces. And in this instance, we can go ahead and we can subtract a portion of 842 quickly. So we could turn that into 800 as a number bond, and we can turn that into 42 as well. I know that 800 plus 42 is the same as 842, so I could subtract them in pieces. So looking at that really quickly, we can go ahead and say that if we were subtracting 1,000 from this, because 800 is really close to subtracting 1,000, then we would say something along these lines, minus 1,000. And remember, we actually took out 200 extra Skittles, so to speak, from our jar, which means that we need to add those back in. And you can do that in a second step if you'd like to. That's totally fine too. We are left with 3,562 Skittles, and we're adding back those 200. It's a lot easier to do mental math when you're looking at hundreds without tens and ones, or looking at doing mental math with just tens without ones, or thousands, things like that. So looking at this, we need to add back in that 200, so we add back in that 200, And what I tend to do is I cross off these numbers as I use them. So I know 842 I am done with because I broke it up into 842. 800 I am now done with because I'm going through the rest of the math for that. That's going to be 3,762. And now I am left with 42. Now 42 I can subtract pretty easily from this because really there are only two place values that would be affected. Tactically, what I could do is go ahead and make another set of number bonds to make this into 40 and make it into 2 and then subtract them separately. You could totally do that as well. So looking at taking away 42 though, I know for a fact that 3,762 minus 40 is going to leave me with 3,722. Taking away this next number, that 2, it would leave me with 3,720. Which is that mental math section there. Just being able to take the numbers that you have, break them into smaller pieces or pieces that make more sense to do mentally without actually having to write things down, and doing it that way. So let's check out another one here. For instance, if we were going to do something along the lines of this, again, here's another one that is subtracting more than is necessary. 456 minus 97. So this one's a little bit different because we're subtracting something that isn't equal to just a number in the ones place. This is something that we're trying to make that next 100 or make that next 10 is what we're really trying to do for mental math here. So again, here we go. The closest number that we have here to 97 that would make quick mental math is 100. So technically I can subtract 100 instead of subtracting 97. Well, what is 97? It's 100 minus 3. So what that means is I'm going to be taking 3 extra away from that plate. Remember, borrowing the Skittles, and I'm going to have to give those back. Now, knowing that, let's write the rest of our problem. 456 minus 100 is 356. I'm going to add back the 3 that I took over, and that is 359. All right, so that is just an example of that. Let's see if we can do any more of those with you. All right, so let's go ahead and say that we are doing another example of this would be 84 minus 39. Looking at that, I can go ahead and say, okay, so 39, can I make it to the next 10 to make it an easier problem, or should I make that to the next 100 to make this an easier problem? And in this instance, making it into that next 10 would be the easier way to solve this. So for instance, if I'm looking at this, I can say that 39 plus 1 is going to be 40. So I can go ahead and I could subtract 40. Well, what is 40? It's 39 plus 1. So in this instance, I'm going to be taking away, remember we're comparing these two numbers here, I'm taking away 1 extra piece here. That means I'm going to have to give back that 1 extra piece. So 84 minus 40 is going to be 44. And I'm adding back, I did this piece, I'm adding back this 1, and it's going to be 45. We'll look at some addition strategies next.